It is the fourth Monday of the month, at 6 o'clock. Please join me in the pledge.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Shipley.
Present.
Ms. Clark Pearson.
Here.
Mr. Quina. Ms. DePort.
Here.
Mrs. DePort. Apologize. President McKinley.
Here. All right. Move for the approval of agenda items. I will entertain a motion.
I move the Grand Ledge Public Schools Board of Education approve the September 23rd, 2019 agenda items as presented.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Passes 6-0. Anyone like to remove anything from consent agenda? Okay. I will entertain a motion for the approval of consent agenda items.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same. 6-0. Okay, moving on to reports. We have an audit report.
We have Zach Screeners here from Maynard Casterison. Welcome, Zach.
All right. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I'm Zach Screenyards with Mayor Casterison, partner there at the firm. I'm here to go over the audits of the June 30, 2019 audited financial statements. You should hopefully have the audited statements in front of you with two corresponding letters, which I'll go over as well. I also provided just an outline of the key topics and items that I'm going to go over today in case you don't want to try to flip through and keep stay with me on going page by page. Everything's listed out for you there in terms of where you can find all the key points. As usual, if there's any questions that you have, I will answer anything that I can. So with that said, starting pages 5 through 7 is the auditor's report. Page 6, more specifically, is actually our auditor's opinion. Happy to report that we are providing the district an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion that we can provide you as your independent auditors. So that is also consistent with what we've had in previous years. So kudos to the district and the team for another clean audit. We appreciate all the hard work that goes into it, and again, another clean audit opinion for you. Point out on pages 8 through 15 are the management discussion and analysis. In case you don't want to read the full 90 pages or so in here, the MD&A is a nice Reader's Digest version of the key items and highlights of the actual numbers themselves and what took place in the district during the 18-19 school year. So just point that out, that if you want to go through that, that's a nice little, again, Reader's Digest version of the audit report in general. Starting on page 17, we start to get into the numbers themselves. Page 17 is the statement of net position. This is the full accrual government-wide statements, includes all funds. Point out a couple things on here. At the bottom of page 17, you'll see from a full accrual government-wide standpoint, there is a deficit of about $54 million. Really what that's related to, and some of you might be familiar because we've talked about it the past couple of years, is this overall net pension liability and net OPEB liability that we now have to report on your district's financial statements for your proportionate share of the statewide unfunded pension and OPEB liabilities that are out there. So when I say that you have a $53 million deficit, it's mostly associated to a net pension liability of about $93 million and a net OPEB liability of about $25 million. It's not uncommon to see districts with a deficit on the full accrual government-wide side of things. I think last I heard there was only one district in the state that didn't have a deficit from a net position standpoint. And so I just point that out there. Also point out overall, you have about, I lost my spot here, about $73.6 million in capitalized assets after depreciation. You also have about $102 million worth of debt associated to capitalized assets. It might seem like you have more debt than you do have capitalized assets, but what I like to point out is you got about $59 million from a result of the bond you guys passed in the 18-19 year that has gone unspent at this point in time. You'll be doing your projects coming up, and so all that needs to be included. It's just not yet capitalized, and so really overall, you're paying down your debt faster than you are depreciating your assets as a district, which is fantastic. Point out the statement of activity starting on page 18, which is just the income statement on the government-wide full accrual side of it. I'd just like to point out you did have a loss of about $147,000, so almost break even on the government-wide financial statements. I'll get into your actual balance sheet related to all your funds, so your fund level statements starting on page 19 and going through page 20. Overall, as a district, you have a total fund balance of about $72.4 million. As I mentioned, you guys had the new bond this year, which brought in about $54 million of overall ending fund balance at this point in time, so that's really what drove that number up. That said, we did test the expenditures associated to that this year, about $1.3 million for 1351A compliance and bond language compliance. Just want to let you know that all that testing has started out really well. We haven't found anything that hasn't been allowable associated to the bonds, and we'll continue to audit that as you continue to spend down those funds associated to all the construction projects you got going on over the next couple of years. In addition to that, within that $72.4 million that I mentioned, your general fund balance is $6.7 million. Of that, 6.1 of that is unassigned. Your overall general fund balance is about 12.1% of overall revenue for the general fund, which is fantastic. And that equates out to about $1,245 per student. That's the student count as it relates to the 18-19 year, just to keep that in perspective. But very strong ratios and percentages there overall from a district standpoint. Pages 21 through 22 is the income statement associated to all your funds. As a district in total, you added about $62 million to your overall fund balance. Again, all that's pretty much associated to the new bonds that came in. But of that $62 million, you did add to your general fund balance by about $416,000. When you compare that to your overall budget, which is where if you start flipping back and forth, it gets a little confusing. But page 63 is your actual budget to actual statement. If you were to look at that, you had a very small budget variance, which is fantastic. Your budget variance overall was about 0.04% of your overall expenditures. And you were pretty much in line with budget within $21,000. So pretty much spot on from a final budget standpoint. So again, kudos to the district and the team there.
Now, when you say that, because we had a $147,000 deficit, then I'm trying to remember, did we plan, if we were only off by 21,000, did we plan a deficit?
No, the $147,000 deficit was in the full accrual government-wide
Oh,
statements.
full accrual, that's right,
Yep.
okay.
The net position
Sorry.
piece. Yep, no problem. From an actual fund level, general fund only, you budgeted to add about $395,000, and you actually added about $416,000.
I'm sorry, I was
Nope,
thinking that,
no
and I
problem.
get my fund approach and my
Yep,
rule
nope,
approach,
no problems
occasionally
there.
reversed.
No problems there. So again, overall, I pretty much hit your budget spot on there. A couple other items of note. We do have a footnote on page 38 that details out your millage as a district. Your debt service millage is 4.19 mils, and your sinking fund is 0.7968 mils, which is, from what I see in the other districts I work on, pretty low. So those are great millages to have, and you're paying down your debt, like I said, faster than you are depreciating your assets. So those are strong millages as it relates to your debt and your sinking fund. One footnote we don't have, but I do want to point out, is in 2019 and in 2020, you did not have to borrow against the state. So we do not have a state aid note in the financial statements this year. That you have seen that in previous years, but just like to point that out, that the district doesn't have to borrow and hasn't had to borrow now for 2 consecutive years, which is fantastic as well. So. And finally, in terms of the footnotes themselves, page 62, we do want to make you aware of a couple upcoming pronouncements. One is in effect for 2020. It's GASB 84. We've had this footnote in here the past couple of years of these upcoming pronouncements. They're just now starting to come to fruition here. But GASB 84 is this idea of the definition of a fiduciary fund. It's all your student accounts and activity accounts, and who's actually controlling where that money is going and how that money is being spent. If it's a district employee now, to be simple, if it's a district employee that directs the funds, it's no longer considered a fiduciary student activity fund. It would be considered a special revenue fund or part of your general fund. Really what this does, and I'm going to call Nancy out here, is it makes a lot of legwork and work in the business office to move the accounting around and the funds around. You actually have to track the income statement side of things now if it's a special revenue fund. And so going through each one of those, you have to kind of go through this analysis of who's really controlling the money. And Nancy's already been preparing for that and has already gotten those wheels in motion as well. So we bring that to your attention because that will change the way your financial statements will look for this upcoming year. So. And then lastly, GASB 87, it's one on leases. It's one we've mentioned the past couple years too. Pretty much every lease is turned into a capitalized lease. We don't think it's going to impact our public schools very much, unless you're really leasing buses or buildings and stuff like that. But that's not for another couple of years, so we just bring that to your attention just to bring it to your attention. And last but not least, we do perform a single audit. You do meet the requirements. Based upon the amount of federal expenditures that you have as a district, you do meet the requirements of having a single audit. We tested the child nutrition cluster and the Title I cluster this year. Very happy to announce no findings whatsoever, no question cost as it relates to those grants. And just in general, to wrap up the financial statements themselves, page 90 is a nice summary schedule that shows if there's any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we have to make you aware of as it relates to the financials or the single audit. It would show in that schedule, and you guys had a clean audit, so no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified either. So clean audit opinion and no issues as it relates to findings or deficiencies. So again, kudos to you and your district. We always come, I always got to make the comment, we always come like 3 weeks after year end and bug Nancy when she's still trying to wrap up the numbers, but she's always ready, she's always prepped for us. And the whole team is, so we appreciate it. And again, thank you very much for everything. So I do have just a quick couple letters here. It's our communication with the board. I'm just going to say this is a very boilerplate letter. If we had any issues that we had to identify, which I've already made pretty clear we haven't, we would throw it in this letter. And so there's really nothing in here. It kind of reads in a negative context, but that's because we're auditors and we're negative like that, I guess. But it's a very boilerplate, so nothing to discuss here. And then just something we've been doing the past couple of years is our supplement. Just kind of lets you know a little bit more about GASB 84 and 87 and a few other things that are coming through the pipeline. So it's a nice little one-sheeter that you can kind of read through. And but overall, that's it for me. So again, thank you very much for having me, and thanks again for all the hard work throughout the course of the audit. So any questions for me?
I do.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question that I've been asked in the past before, and are you truly an independent auditor if we pay you?
Hey,
And I know the answer to the question, but if you could say it to the TV so I can stop answering this question.
Yes.
It would be
we
great.
are an independent auditor if you pay us.
Okay, and you're licensed and regulated.
Yep, we're licensed.
and
Yep.
you have
We go through peer
standards.
review. Every 3 years we go through a peer review. We have an external CPA firm come to our firm and take a look at our work papers and draw samples and do all the fun stuff that we do to Nancy. And so, yeah, we get peer reviewed, and there's a report written up, and we've passed our peer review ever since I've been with the firm, which is almost 11 years. And so, yep.
Wait, you hire an independent auditor to do independent audits? of
We
audit?
do hire an independent auditor.
This sounds
to do
like
an
a
independent audit
conspiracy.
of,
It's,
Yeah.
I think wasn't Michigan one of the first state, or no, it was Maryland, I think was the first state for peer review because that's where I'm registered. So,
Okay.
um,
But yep, we are.
Excellent. That's what I thought. But
No
it's
problem.
just- it's one of those things where people ask you a question, and you know that it's a crazy question, but you can't
Yep.
behave that way.
Nope.
Well, it's not crazy, and I think generally accepted auditing standards actually, in their ethics section of it, maybe it was AICPA, actually addresses that, because it does seem weird, but, you'd have no auditors if
Yeah.
they couldn't be paid. Or you'd always have to have, like, the state be your auditor, and that's not always independent,
Especially when you get funding from that.
because then who audits the state?
Who watches the watchers?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else for me? All right. Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Take
Nick.
care.
Okay. Always anticipated Mr. Smith with the Capital Connections.
Now I feel like I'm increasing the expectations. Mine will be a short report again. Everyone's following the news. Seems to be that the House and Senate have agreed on a proposed at least school budget, but none of that's been adopted yet. We don't have a final statewide budget in place, and so not a lot else has moved with respect to legislation that's relevant to this group. I guess I'll throw it out there. Thanks in part to our school board association that mentioned House Bill 4125, just so that I have something to report this week, is a proposal to redirect money that last year was directed out of the school aid fund under the state income tax law because of, as an offset to the decision allowing sales tax on out-of-state sales. So it was anticipated that those out-of-state sales would generate significant revenue for Michigan. Therefore, they thought they could use money otherwise directed to the school aid fund for things like roads and elsewhere. Also important, but obviously rather not offset that money and just add what's available to the school aid fund. That's just been introduced, so it hasn't gone anywhere yet, but something to pay attention to. I have nothing else.
Thank you. Mrs. Dufort with Eaton Risa.
So, this month we had a presentation from Kim Fallison, Prevention Services, and she did a presentation on mental health, for our youth and sexual education and how that relates to, RISA and what it looks like as it goes out to all the other districts. They are developing some very interesting programming, but with federally funded 5-year grant programs. And they have a consortium for districts to do that because of the minimum number of students required to participate. So we are in a consortium with DeWitt, ourselves, Waverly, Lansing, Holt, and Eaton Rapids. And they are working primarily with middle school and high school staff and students to provide the mental health awareness training, and it looks like really high quality stuff. I have a slide presentation if anybody's interested in looking at it further. This is the kind of programming I really feel like we need to continue to support. It gives our staff training. My understanding is also Grand Ledge had someone who was beginning the training. This is the second year of a 5-year program, and they haven't left the district. So we currently don't have anyone who's had first year training, so I'm hoping we can get somebody in place and get them started. Other news, there was Relevant Academy had an audit, which it had no problems, nothing unusual or concerning reported. There was an interesting vehicle donation of a 1963 Buick Riviera to the automotive program. So the question is, who gets to drive it when kids getting it all fixed up? And finally, there was an annual report this was going to be presented to all the superintendents. But extremely well done. But the part that I wanted to draw your attention to was that there is a breakdown by each district that Eaton Risa supports, and it gives specific numbers for Grand Ledge with funding, early childhood, prevention services, general ed, special ed, and career technical education with number of very interesting data points. For example, we had 10 National Technical Honor Society student members. 97% of our education development plan was completed. We've seen some of this data through our Grand Ledge work, but we've also got a great breakdown, and I know that they are going to present this to the superintendents and give them this information to then distribute to all the board members. So I would encourage you to look at that closely and get some very revealing information. And that's it for this report.
Okay. Thank you. You also have the Grand Ledge Education Foundation.
So GLEP met on August 28th. We are changing the date of next year's race, so it will not be aligned with Nathan Henry. So that will be July 18th, 2020. There's approximately $10,000 for the teacher grants. The information has been sent out to staff if they would like to apply for one of those grants. Their application is due by October 11th, and we will be meeting as a group then to review those requests and make decisions when those will be, who will be receiving those grants, and that date will be October 16th.
Thank you. The run, is that the Spells run? Okay. All right. Thank you. And Dr. Metcalf with a bond update.
Just a couple of items. First of all, we had our page turn for Holbrook September 12th, and that was kind of the last time we saw all of the details and said, yep, let's go forward. Those were turned over to Clark for them to start putting them in a package that can be bid out. We have the Beagle page turn on September 30th, which will be next Monday, I believe, and we will go through all the details one last time and sign off, and then that will be turned over to Clark, I say on October 4th. And we have two presentations coming up in the very near future for the community. One will be on Thursday, October 10th, and the other is on Wednesday, October 16th at 6 p.m. in the Administrative Conference Room, and we hope to have a majority, if not all, renditions as they are being bid out that we will be presenting to anybody who attends.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Moving on to public comment on non-agenda items.
Hello, my name is Caden Hirschman. I'm a sophomore, and I am a member of Student Council. Homecoming week began Saturday night with the FFL game. FFL stands for the Female Football League, and there was a 3-game tournament of flag football between the grade levels. The game took place in the community stadium under the lights, in the junior class of 2021 won the 3rd year in a row by beating the freshman class in the championship. Half of all proceeds from the FFL game goes to the Susan G. Komen Foundation. This year we raised $850. Homecoming continues all week long with spirit dress-up days leading up to Friday, with the pep assembly parade at 5:30 and the football game at 7. And it ends with the homecoming dance on Saturday. Go Comets.
Thank you.
First off, I'd just like to say thank you for your time in inviting us to present today. I am Sam Kunch. I'm a junior at Grand Ledge High School. I'm in video production.
And I'm Tyler McCready. I'm a senior at Grand Ledge High School. I'm also in video production, and as a senior, the Female Football League lost it for quite a bit. Comet TV, or the news, which is why we're here speaking, is a cross-curricular collaboration between video production and leadership with the student council, and our advisor isn't here, but Tracy Clark, she advises the news, and she does a fantastic job. She works in and outside of the classroom to help us get that done and provide quality content to the students. And Mr. Logo, who is here, is the leadership advisor, and he also helps a lot with the leadership side of things. Can't say much because I'm not much of an asset to that class.
Our goal for the news is to promote events and activities that students could participate in. It's also to provide key information for students and staff and parents alike. For example, the musical's coming up. It's going to be White Christmas. I am the main character, Bob Wallace.
Yes, and while Sam will be wearing a tux there, tomorrow we will not be wearing any type of dress-up clothes because the theme is sportswear. Again.
And speaking of themes, you may have saw on social media, last Friday we had a suicide awareness theme for our Waverly football game. Aside from the win, the news can very help pushing forward important issues.
Yes, of course, and while that win was important to the community of Grand Ledge, the cross-country team also has a win this season, so we'd love to see that.
Being part of the news for me has really helped my public speaking skills and just being able to be in front of the camera and not be nervous.
Yeah, and with the opportunities that we've been provided, for the future at least, as a senior, I got to think about college and jobs coming up. I've learned to kind of express myself in a way that I can stand out to other people, especially with applications. You just want to name your sheet, you got to find something. Along with that, we've learned how to use an Excel worksheet to get information from other people. That also requires time management. You have to get these out by Friday, edit it, and then go to school and get to see our pretty faces. But if you'd like to see the news this week, our YouTube channel has it, and we also have Twitter and Instagram, GL_council. And thank you guys for having me. We hope you get to see our face on Friday.
We're not going to get to see it right now on
Thank you.
on the screen?
We can pull it up if you have Apple TV at home.
Kim's response, I think that's a no.
Yeah. So I have a question.
Pull it.
Well, we can work on that, and maybe we can get it before the end of the night.
Is this a daily newscast?
So, video production, the class that we take, we break it up throughout the week. So Monday we have writing script. So Sam and I will sit down with a student from leadership because while we do work together, the class students have different we collaborate on ideas to kind of provide entertainment throughout the script. And on Tuesday, we have common pulse, which is basically we go around interviewing students throughout the high school to try to get input of everyone. I think that's important, especially because we have such a large student population. Everyone does research opinions on different topics there. Wednesday, Sam and I sit down and we film the news. We get to deal with the news for a whole hour. Thursday we edit, and then Friday we get it out to the whole staff supervisors.
And it being on Friday and us only having a week to do it, it really improves our time management skills with all the segments and editing and news desk that me and Tyler have to do. It really helps us with that.
So on Friday, is that played first thing in the morning at a certain hour?
Yep, it's played. All the teachers are supposed to play it. I mean, some of them don't. But they're supposed to play it in the morning and first thing. And so all the students will watch it in the whole school. Sometimes we even get called out in the hallways, which is pretty cool.
So you're the anchors? Is that
We
the...
are the anchors. I've been an anchor for 3 years now, and Sam unfortunately has to deal with me, but he's better looking and more talented, so
Yeah.
very smooth.
This is my first year, yes.
So are there other students in the video production class?
Yes, there's students who film, students who edit, like specialize. There's other students who do the Comet Pulse. Me and Tyler are now only on the news desk. There's this, we work with leadership for students that interview kids. There's kids from leadership that will interview, ask questions, and it just kind of provides a fun way to get a little census about some fun questions. And, yeah.
Or to add something, I know we talked about leadership and video production. Like leadership's the backbone. They do all the hard work. They think of the ideas.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caden. All right. Moving on to old business. I will entertain a motion for the approval of the 2018-2019 audit.
Move the Grand Ledge Public Schools Board of Education approve the 2018-2019 audit as presented.
Second.
Discussion.
Yeah, I would like to thank Nancy and the staff. This is an extremely clean audit. It when it doesn't cite anything, it's just a stack of paper. It's sort of interesting to go through, and it's tells you what happened last year. It doesn't really tell you what happened. It's happening now, really. So, other than you can sort of project off it, I guess. But this is, I think, the earliest we've had it done in a very long time, and that is really says something about both the fact that there were not a lot of items that they would have found that they'd have to give extra scrutiny to, and to the organization of the business office that they could conduct this audit so quickly. So this is I can't remember the date that this is due at the state. Isn't it like the middle of November or November 8th or something? November 1st. So this is way ahead of schedule. There are lots of them that get submitted on the day that it's due at the state or a few days after. So anyway, thank you for such a really, really great job on this.
I think we've kind of come to, you get us spoiled, because as Sarah will tell you, not every audit looks like this. And I've been on the board, I think this is my 7th audit, and they're almost always super clean. I can't remember a deficiency, and it's so refreshing as a board member to know that our books are in the correct order, we're doing things the right way. It's easy to sleep at night, where I know your
Yeah.
experiences on other books, it's not always like that.
Less
So-
restful.
So I really appreciate the hard work that your office does in all year round, but especially also in the preparation for the audit.
See, I didn't think you got any sleep because I figured you were getting the books all in order. So. Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Passes 6-0. Moving on to the approval of operations policy FM 414 on decision making.
Second.
Discussion.
Yeah, I'm not totally comfortable with that. That's still a pretty high number. And I checked around various areas, and some of that is double what most districts have. And I realize that this is a huge bond issue. So in the scheme of things, it would make sense. But in any one project, to have one event that could be that high, be in the $100,000 range as a change order, seems high. And so I guess what I would like to do is amend that to add that that when it goes over 50,000, that there be the bond committee. The bond committee has 3 people on it. So it's not a one where we have to notice meetings or do any of that. You can have it by phone call. I'd like to get 2 of the 3 people on the bond committee to also just say, verbally, to say yes, that they're aware of it when it goes through, just so there's an additional eye on it. And I understand it will come back for review to the bond committee, but that's a fair amount of a change order and the amount of time it would take to effectuate the whatever construction change that is, seems that there should be just another, at least another person or two that says, yeah, I get that, I think that's okay. So I just would like that to be sort of immediate, notification and some sort of acknowledgement and approval before that goes forward. So it's not really a formal action of the board, but just like anything where you have, and I realize again that there'd be scrutiny at some point, but you are beginning that process and you get a little bit down the road before you get to a bond committee with those kind of change orders. So I just would like a second set of some sort of approval on that. So I would be happy to structure that any way anyone would suggest, or
Are you asking anything above 50,000? Needs approval of 2 of the 3 board bond members?
right, and it
that
doesn't
correct?
have to be a meeting, it can be just
Sure.
an oral okay
Verbal.
by telephone.
Okay.
Just, that I'm, gonna do this so that there's at least a couple of people that know. Because it's a fair amount of money. It becomes pretty material, I think, at that point, so. So anyway, I would just amend it to add that. I don't wanna make it too onerous. I don't wanna slow down construction, but, I don't,
Sure.
want other people to know.
That-
So,
To me, that makes sense.
okay.
That would not, to me, that's 3 phone calls. We can
Yeah, if
continue
you
to
get
move
2
within the
phone
day.
calls, that's fine.
Right.
You don't have to get to the 3rd. If you don't wanna pay Ringo, that's okay.
And typically, that's gonna be in a Friday update anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd be really good about it, but it is more of a process question than
Trust.
who I trust.
Do you need it 1 second?
What,
Yeah.
what about so are we gonna do it for 50,000 for both the assistant suit and the suit?
Yeah, I guess I'm assuming that the assistant would be talking to you, so I'm not as concerned about that moment. It's beyond that, so, if you approve it 50 or lower, I think that's reasonable given the scale of and the cost of construction, but, and certainly, you're not available or you have someone that, that the assistant superintendent can prove, I think that's fine. I don't think it reaches a level of full board approval, but I think there should be just another notch of oversight to that level, so.
I would be in favor of that.
Okay, so if that's a friendly amendment, then I don't need I don't need to change it, or otherwise I can formally request an amendment and we can vote on the amendment. So
Should we
Let
vote on the
your
first one? Is that what we need to do?
you'd have to vote on, well, first of all, I'd have to get a second for my
And then
amendment.
before we second, I wanna make sure I understand
Sure.
the proposed amendment,
Mhm.
now that we've talked it out. We're okay with 50 and 100,000.
Mhm.
It's just for the decision of 100,000
We're over 50.
Over 50.
over 50. So it's not if it hits 100 or higher.
No, if it's anything over 50 is still, the superintendent can approve it, but he should seek some sort of verbal approval by the 2 of the 3 board members on the bond committee.
Are you saying above 50 or between 50 and 100?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
If it's-
Between
if
50 and
it's-
100.
Yeah, if it's
Yeah,
changed
sorry.
here, it'd be between 50 and 100.
Right.
Because 100 would have
Thanks,
to
that's
go
a
before
good
the bond official.
That's a good point, right. After that, it's
And if they are, how does that, so do we need to change that bullet point, let's see, number,
I will add that in, Ben.
yeah.
That's a pretty simple.
The 100,000 was when this was a policy that would provide some autonomy for an officer to make that decision. If we're going to get at least sign off from 2 board members on the committee, is 100 still
Still goes to board bond.
right?
I think 100 is still a reasonable limit even with that, because those are pretty material amounts, and I
That's
think
a
at
big-
that point, you're talking about a change that, is sort of half of a house you could do with kind of a change order, so.
Second
Just
bullet
put it in
point-
scale.
Second bullet point on the second page would be 50,000.
I would add superintendent is authorized to approve change orders up to 100,000 with the verbal approval of at least 2 out of the 3 board bonded advisory members.
You wanna go down to the next, individual change order over a
Still,
hundred.
that remains.
Mhm.
It has to go board bond advisory.
Right.
No, the other one's fine, John, because it's got assistant superintendent HR operations. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that too.
Yep.
I s-
Because they're not gonna make that decision without having a conversation with them.
So, I'm fine. I'm in the section now under the emergency. And I'm still in favor of, regardless
That-
of the number if something has to happen for safety or et cetera, that we're not worried about making phone calls to board members.
Yeah, that's basically will shut down the project.
Yes.
If there's a major crisis going on, and
Yeah.
all of you are gonna know about that. We actually had, in our last governance meeting, discussed a different policy that we looked at, and I think we'd agreed to add a couple of those paragraphs in, just so that if there was a major emergency going on,
I agree.
Yeah.
I just, I wanna make sure that doesn't all of a sudden conflict with what changes we're making here. It would seemingly be, I don't wanna say unlimited, but any event that would,
Well,
that
put somebody in danger.
put someone in danger, threaten the project or anything.
you can put in there except for immediate endangerment, that, you know, that something is collapsing, I suppose you can get a,
You know, I think that's probably gonna generate some very serious conversations across the board and board advisory if we have a situation where somebody was put in danger.
Yeah.
right.
So that's gonna rise to a different level, but we wanted to mirror some of that language from a different policy, and I think it's something that I can work with if you're comfortable with it.
Mr. Schiffler, how do you feel? You're good. Mr. Kleiner?
I mean, I support the friendly.
I was gonna say, did, yeah,
amendment.
oh, would
Okay,
maybe a
I just,
friendly
just trying to,
So if
fill
it's
it
a
out.
friendly amendment, we can just agree that now the motion, we don't need an amendment. It's
Okay.
just going to be a vote on the text
then
with those changes
as
in it. as
Okay.
This
listed.
is not anywhere near substantive, but grammatically, if you look at the, if the change order is necessary to ensure that the project remains within its timeline and or to address a previously unknown condition and is not for what would otherwise be additional work, I think it's really not a way to write that. I think we should probably put a comma after each and then significantly substantive, but
is that a separate motion?
No.
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
I'm okay with whatever comma you want. I'm looking at thinking, I see what you're saying, I would be,
Okay, so the friendly amended proposal we are voting on. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Passes 6-0. Okay. Moving. Moving to the approval, oh no,
okay.
the approval of
feel like you-
operations policy PER 908, disciplinary policy prohibiting portion referrals. Do I have a motion?
I'll second that motion.
Discussion.
Let me point out this is required by state law.
I think that's important.
Adoption adopting a policy is required of us. Form of discussion, I will point out that I find the legislature to be lily-livered chickens and yellow bellies for sneaking.
Don't beat around the bush.
For sneaking this in.
Call it right.
Well, I mean, we're on TV. I got to be appropriate language, because the Marine in me has much firmer language. The way that we handle budgeting for public education is we rewrite the School Aid Act every year. Herm Edwards famously said, you know, when you do something that you need to be a man or a woman, his words, about it and put your name on it. You don't hide policies that you know will be unpopular and would not survive the scrutiny of daylight in an appropriation. The conference report for this year's bill was seen by, let's just call it 9 people before it came out of that committee. There was no real a chance to address the language in it. And I'm sure that in 2016, when they put in the language that we're talking about that is now being amended in the current conference report, it was probably the same number of people. And it was just, you know, sneaky. And so I have a lot of problems with the state requiring us to, or penalizing us for not adopting a policy that we must follow the law, which is something that we're required to do, and so is all of our staff. This is just the lowest form of governance. It's frankly an embarrassment, and I'm disappointed, both as a Republican and as someone who's pro-life. Like, I don't approve. It's just, it's the lily-livered, and that is the discussion I have.
Right, because the policy contains certain disciplinary measures for anyone who engages in the conduct, but we're fined $100,000 for not having the policy. And you could, I think John's point is, they could have just had a state law that people voted up or down with their names on it, instead of sneaking it into several billion, well, it's more than several $billion appropriations bill that, and I actually read up on this, and what I saw was that most people didn't catch this until sometime after it had passed. They weren't even aware that it was in the bill, but we're being told that we have to sort of adopt what they've already adopted as a policy when it's state law. I mean, it is extremely annoying, but it's.
And we should be trusted. Make it state law, but make it state law. Now they've added financial penalties for noncompliance, which is not how they treat every state law, but just this statement that they've slipped into an appropriations bill as opposed to a statute, as we've all alluded to. So I agree with everything I'm hearing. As the one who had to make this motion, I made it for state law compliance purposes and avoiding costing the district money. There's also some discrepancy on how this policy may ultimately look. It's just that it has to be done by October 1st. We don't know how it will look, and this is our last chance before that deadline hits. And we can change this every meeting if we can and need to, depending on how this shakes out.
I mean, I don't have any interest in
Or eliminate it.
Talking about this
Or
every
eliminate it. That's really what I was getting at. If this is stricken, then this can go away just as fast.
So after talking with most of the board, to summarize, when we vote, we'll be voting to secure money for our students rather than adopt a policy we may not agree with.
I think that's the ultimate question here is,
Right.
are we going to vote to intentionally take money out of our own pocketbook?
Right.
And I have heard everybody on this board for the last year and a half that I've been on the board talking about school funding and making sure that we talk to our legislators about school funding. School funding is one of the most critical aspects of what we do here. And I would hate to see a nickel taken from the schools just to make a statement one way or the other, regardless of what your politics are.
And for a problem that may not exist in our school district, or that we have no knowledge of any of these kinds of consultations happening. So it's to having us not have to pay for a problem we don't think we have. So, you know, it's certainly worth my time to, I can go home and say, what did I do today? The answer would be not much.
You implemented a solution for the funds.
Exactly.
Any more discussion?
Something to feel good about.
I would just like to say, I'm hoping that, once we know where things stand, that we will be looking at this. I'm uncomfortable making this decision, knowing that we will have to play in the future for policy.
That's the hard part with the October 1st deadline and the fact that we spent a significant amount of time in the legislature and in the governor's office working for a roads deal in addition to the budget, as opposed to just doing the budget. So we had an idea what this language would look like. We tried to walk and chew gum, as it turns out.
But to be fair, the amendment, we don't need to go down that road tonight, but the amendment, we still have a very similar problem.
Yes.
The language is different, but the ultimate
Right.
issue, requirement
help
is still
much.
there. So, the only way I see out of this is if the governor vetoes.
But if she vetoes, then we're still stuck with the current existing law. And so we'd actually be in a worse place by not having one by that date. Although if she signs the new one, let's say tomorrow, which she won't, but we would actually be out of compliance immediately by not having a policy. So we kind of actually have that.
I spoke with East Lansing board members, and they were waiting till September 30th to have a special meeting.
We can do it as a special meeting?
Correct. So, but like you said,
I think we got paid.
it's not going to change the actual
The issue is
the
still
issue.
there,
Correct. Correct.
even with the amendment.
Right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-1. Great. Comments? I'm sorry, public comment on agenda items.
Hello. I'm losing my voice and I'm in my pajamas because of homecoming week. But I just wanted to say that those kids do a phenomenal job both with leadership and video production. I got to go to the Powder Puff game on Friday, female football league, and it was awesome. So, but I wanted to address you today regarding the new board policy regarding abortion that was just adopted. I appreciate the discussion that was held at the last board meeting. I know this decision did not come lightly for many of you. Personally, I'm appalled at the need for this legislation. It specifically targets teachers at the high school, specifically female teachers, and specifically those that teach health and other subjects similar to health. Our students reach out to staff members with whom they feel most comfortable when they don't feel like they can go to their parents. Schools are supposed to be a safe environment for our kids. Over the years, I have been approached, and my approach to the situation has always been to be a bridge to the conversation with their parents. However, if a student doesn't feel like they can safely communicate with their parent and ask us for information on where to go to get help, we should be able to give them names and locations of professionals that can discuss their options. To punish teachers for giving phone numbers is ridiculous. I know many of you expressed the same opinion on this legislation, and I appreciate that. I heard Jared say that this policy would be removed if the legislation is overturned. I heard Ben say that, I'm not sure where you were going with that, but you said if the legislation changed, we would still need some sort of policy. So I'm hoping if the legislation is changed or removed, that we would update the policy accordingly so that we are still within compliance of the state. But at that point, I feel like that's where it needs to end, compliance with the state. I understand that this is $100,000 to the district if we don't adopt this policy, and I can appreciate taking a stance on making sure we are fully funding our kids' educations. But at the same time, if it's removed or changed, we need to act accordingly. Thanks.
I'd like to clarify something with that. What I meant was there is an amendment potential amendment that has been offered, correct?
Right.
Mhm.
It doesn't really change the penalty.
It actually kind of makes it worse.
I was gonna
Increases
say
the
it's
penalty.
worse.
It makes
yeah.
it worse.
It ends up being a full percent of our foundation allowance for
Just
not having a policy.
400,000.
I was referring to that. It does. It assesses a 1% total penalty.
Foundation allowance
Foundation
penalty, which is about 400.
That's what I was
thousand
referring
with the
to.
district.
If even if the amendment passes, it's
Still a
Is-
requirement to have a
still a
policy.
requirement.
It's still a
and-
requirement, so we can we could remove the 3%
and it
and
hits
still have a policy.
it hits the district. Hits the district even worse.
We would still have it. Okay. Comments from staff and board?
Yeah, I actually have a couple. First of all, I played on the Powder Puff football team before homecoming my senior year, and we beat the juniors pretty thoroughly. I was, and I was pretty sure after that that I never wanted to play even one that involved tearing little flags off of people. I didn't like being knocked to the ground very much. But I also just took a quick look at the Relevant Academy audit, and just I think the one I had was the last year's. They had almost a 20% excess revenue over expenses. That's that would be, it would more than cover our penalty should we violate the state law. I'm wondering because Relevant Academy is it's licensed or it's authorized by Eaton Risa, right?
Correct.
So when I was on the Eaton Risa board, I would always remind them that there was oversight requirements that the board should have. I don't know, Denise, whether this year whether you actually saw the audit yet. No.
Yes, we just.
I just went to the state site, but I just didn't have time to dig through. But if they're having that kind of, if that's just aberrant, that's one thing. If that's a trend they have, and I haven't really looked at it in the last couple of years, good for them. But underspending is as bad as overspending because you're not a piggy bank. You're there to provide services. So I'm not sure why they had such a high excess revenue, but really I just wonder if that's something that we might want to just explore a little bit because if they don't want to use it, I got some ideas.
Tina Monroe did address that as she reported on the audit, and I don't have that information with me, but there was some discussion. I don't trust my memory to try to recall
Well, and it's-
specific numbers, but I'd be happy to share that with you. And part of the rationale with the numbers is the number of students that are currently enrolled and the ones they anticipate, and having financial reserves to it comes into count day when they want to release students. So traditionally their numbers go way up and they have to carry the same amount of staff. So there were several different pieces of discussion about their budget and their numbers.
Well, and it's a small budget, it's not even quite $1 million. So, any variation can cause a fairly significant trend in either direction. It's just that, so 20% sounds like a lot, but, if you're talking relatively small numbers, it takes very little to suddenly shift you away. I just haven't looked at all of theirs, and I know that Eaton Risa has oversight responsibilities, and certainly the superintendent there meets with the whole region superintendents to discuss it. So I just, if there's, if it's just this was a good year and that's it, that's great. But if it's something where there's something where they should be spending more, then we should be, that's an oversight responsibility. I'm just mentioning it because I was surprised by how high it was. But again, it could revert, it could go the other direction with just one unexpected expenditure. So.
I would jump in and just say congratulations and thank you to Nancy Brzezinski and the entire business office. There is a lot of work, and it's $60 million budget, and a whole lot of detail goes into paying 700 employees and keeping it all straight. All the bills that come and go and get paid, and then, by the way, we're adding another $60 million that's coming in for bond. And as the money comes in and goes out for sinking fund, it is an enormous job, an enormous responsibility. Nancy does it extremely well, and she was a little shorthanded this year. We had one of her right-hand individuals had a baby, so she was out about 12 weeks, and Nancy just continued to move forward with the staff that she had. And so, Nancy, thank you so much for all that you do for the district, and thank you for a job very well done.
It's also my understanding that one of your staff was working from home on maternity leave in preparation for that. That's the kind of above and beyond
That's
staff
tough.
work that really makes this district. Not that I would ever expect you to be working on maternity leave. Believe me, I've
Just so
seen
you
that
can
up
sleep
close and
at
personal. That is no, absolutely.
I would like to mention the, and I think Caden Hirschman mentioned it, the student section. Each week has themes that they follow, the superhero or USA or camo or whatever, and I don't know what theme they had planned this week, but they changed it last minute. We were playing at Waverly. Waverly had a suicide this past week, and they changed their theme to suicide awareness to match the other student section. So that was pretty cool to see. It was kind of nice not to see the student sections going back and forth at the games, yelling at each other, but that was some Comet pride right there. That was really cool. And I assume there was some adults involved with that too. So thank you for those of you that were out there making that change. Any other comments? Okay. We have future topics. As Dr. Metcalf mentioned, we have the community bond presentations at 6 p.m. The administrative conference room Thursday, October 10th, and Wednesday, October 16th. Board bond advisory meeting Monday, October 14th at 5 o'clock at Sodden Room 107, and work session Monday, October 14th, 6 p.m. in the administrative conference room. We are adjourned at 7:03.